Hi, my name is Bartosz, and I'm the head of business development at GOG.
Hi, I'm Marcin. I'm a senior business developer at GOG, and I've been with the company since the very beginning. So if there are any questions about DRM and how we managed to do all of those things, I hope that we'll be able to answer.
So for someone who has no idea what DRM is, can you give like a little brief elevator pitch of what it is and why it's so controversial?
Yeah, that is actually a very good question. Like a DRM is basically, by definition, any means with which the game is checking if the users have a license for the game, if they have a legitimate copy. Like what it really means kind of changed over the years. When GOG started, one of the problems that gamers had at the time was that the DRMs in the physical copies on the game of the games were very intrusive, and they also they had also a lot of problems, and they were preventing like legitimate buyers from even playing the game. There was a problem of them not being able to launch titles that they bought, for example, a couple of years back. So that was a huge issue that GOG. One of the issues that GOG wanted to solve once it was established back in the day. Currently, the situation changed in a way that mostly DRMs are online license checks. Like, for example, you have on Steam or on other platforms. So basically, you try to launch a game and you need to be online, and the Steam client or whatever client you are using is checking if you have the license for the game. In general, those can be like very easily bypassed unless you are using Denuvo. But because Denuvo is making the exe file practically speaking unmodifiable, but of course it depends. Sometimes it gets really cracked really easy after a day or two, or even on the day of launch. Sometimes it takes a lot of time, and the problem with that is that for the end user is there are cases, and some of them are practically speaking verified, that it does affect the game's performance. So having that in your game requires you to basically have a better PC in order to enjoy the game with a certain performance. So this is more or less what the DRM currently is and was.
And I remember, because I'm older, so I remember the days before DRM, before Steam, before GOG, how you'd get a CD key, right? That was the whole thing. But then the problem was people were starting to. My friend showed me a site where you could get CD keys, like just CD keys, so you could play he'd lend you your disc, you could insert the CD key, and like piracy became a big problem in the 90s, in the late 90s, with particularly PC games, which. Is that what led to the DRM? That the server checks eventually? Was that what the whole point of that was originally for GOG?
That is that is kind of how this whole thing evolved. Even before, like in the 90s, you had also DRM in the form, and in the 90s actually you can write a whole article about the DRMs that were used in the games in the 90s to verify if a user actually bought the game legitimately. Like from simple things like during certain part of the game asks you to, hey, just enter the word on the 37th page of the manual that is here, right? You needed to enter the correct word from the manual, and the game will run only there. If what you put in was the correct answer. There were also like things like whole contraptions that were shipped with the game. Like, for example, we had a game, I think it's one of the Star Trek games, that you have basically like a ring of numbers, and there are two concentric rings, and the game asks you to if you want to put a coordinates on the plan of the planet, you are putting the coordinates using those rings, and then you are reading the correct code for that particular planet or something like that. So there were very, very interesting ways the DRM was introduced in a lot of those games, and with some of those titles we didn't remove it. we kind of left it there because we think it's part of the history. It kind of makes it's a cool way that those games were working, and for that particular reason, for example, with those rings, we actually added those to the game in the form like a small app that the user can turn all of those things and read the correct answer, but they can also launch the game without that if they choose to. So this is something that, like I said, you can write a whole article about.
Yeah, I mean, Monkey Island had the same thing. LucasArts had the dial. It was like a little dial you spun and had to match things up before you could install or play the game, like open it. I remember that. That's way back.
Yeah.
So now we're in 2022, and like things like Steam and GOG have really taken off. Like you guys are pretty big. Like how does that affect? How is DRM affecting players in today's world in a negative sense? Because it sounds like it was like with everything we do in our planet, we start off with really good intentions and then it ends up getting very ugly really quickly.
Well, I think right now, like as Marcin said before, like the landscape has changed, and DRM is more about actually playing together with other people. And we still to this day see absolutely no reason why DRM should be implemented on games that are meant to be played in single player, right? So we are still like fighting this battle, because even though it's been 14 years since GOG was established, like some of the core beliefs of why GOG was established, like they are still valid to this day. But obviously what it means for us as a platform is that we are actively monitoring what our audience wants to play and how games are changing in general.
We need to remember that DRM right now requires you to have an online connection, and you would think that this is not a big problem, and especially now. However, with, for example, the introduction of Steam Deck, right? You have your entire library of games, and Steam Deck as a portable console is basically for traveling. And so on Steam, whenever you're losing connection with the internet, you are basically losing your DRM library. The only games that you are able to play while you're on the train, on the plane, or wherever, is the games that do not have that requirement. So basically, having a DRM-free game gives you the freedom to play the game whenever you want, and on any device that basically is able to run the game without you having to authenticate each time.
Yeah, I have that problem with the Switch. Switch has that service that you can play their Super Nintendo games and stuff, and I have to open the Switch in the airport lobby, open the game, leave it open, leave the Switch on, then enter the plane so I can still play it. If I turn it off or goes to sleep, it tries to connect to the internet to verify I have the service, and then I can't play it and it kicks me out. So yeah, that is a big problem.
Exactly, and even for Steam Deck, because on Steam you can also run games that are not on Steam, right? So you basically bought a game that has a DRM, and you cannot play it on the plane, while someone who basically just pirated a copy of it and it's launching it through Steam Deck, because it is possible, is able to enjoy the game perfectly well. So basically, this whole thing is punishing users who bought the game legitimately, on top of all of the other things that are connected to it.
So what is GOG's plan to deal with this and insert more DRM-free gaming in the future for the platform? Like, what's your guys' goal?
I think our goal is, I think it's still the same. So we believe in what we are doing, and we really believe that by being honest and upfront with gamers, like they're basically gonna repay this to us. And this is the reason we keep bringing more games, signing more publishers that a couple years ago they would never even consider releasing DRM-free games. Yet over the past couple years, we really did sign some very cool developers, and their games are being released on a regular basis. And I think it really changes with like developers and publishers. They just need to warm up to us, and they need to see, first of all, that they need to trust us, obviously, but we have our ways to convince them to at least give it a try. We know from experience that being on GOG does not have impact on your sales anywhere else. So it's about getting them to trust us. And I think that once we are past that stage, it's really much easier, and they are super happy to be working with us, because they see the value of being on a platform such as GOG pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Yeah.
piracy still a problem like in 2022? I know, like I said before, we talked a little bit about before, it was a big problem in the 90s and late 90s, but like I feel like it's a lot harder to pirate any game now on any platform, regardless of genre, unless it's like a game from like the 1990s, you know, the emulators, something that can be emulated on your computer.
I would say that it's as easy as it ever was. If you have just a Steam DRM or Epic DRM or whatever DRM, you practically have no DRM, because your games will appear on the pirate site basically at day one. So practically speaking, it makes no difference. It just makes the legitimate users' lives a bit harder. If you are using the Denuvo, then it might be worth it in some cases from a publisher perspective, but it is also a huge risk. And on top of that, you are reducing the performance of your game, and that also might affect your reviews in a very negative way. And sometimes 1% makes a huge difference, especially, for example, in your game's reviews on Steam. That you are, for example, switching between mostly positive and mixed, because that has huge impact on sales. Those are basically, the pirated copies are basically sales that wouldn't have happened anyway. The problem was that a lot of publishers were looking at it from a perspective that, hey, this game was pirated that many times, so those are the lost sales. What we found out during our research, and this is actually something that we are proving to the publishers over and over again, that those users who pirated the game wouldn't buy it anyway. And if there's also only a very, very, very small percentage of people who would bought it at full price. What we recommend doing to the publishers is basically giving people additional value when they are buying the game on the platform. So you have cloud, you have the ease of use, the very smooth installation process, all of those additional things. But you are not preventing your customers from accessing the games when they, for example, like I said, do not have an internet connection. Another thing with DRM that we should probably also mention here, and why it's DRM-free is so important for GOG, is that one of the things that we do here is basically, as GOG was founded on this idea of game preservation. And a huge part of this game preservation and building your own collection is also the sense of ownership. So you are buying the game and you need to feel that you own it. So when you get the game on GOG, you download it, you can basically store it, you can launch it in number of years. The GOG or the internet, hopefully that won't be the case, but does not have to exist, or you do not have the need to have connection. You can launch the game. It's practically speaking yours, right? When the game has DRM, you do not have that. When you are launching the game, someone is asking you, hey, do you have a license for this game? And your computer is responding, yes, I do. On GOG, there is no such check.
Yeah, and like we've mentioned, we keep talking the importance of DRM free, but it is like we have a lot of fires where I live, and sometimes we lose powers for a few days, and it was uncanny when I lost my internet and I tried to connect to my Xbox. The amount of stuff I wasn't able to play, even the single player stuff, just would not allow me to even open it without being connected to an internet connection. I didn't have any, so I couldn't play anything on my console at the time. And we're not talking online games. We're talking single player games that don't require an online connection whatsoever. Wasn't allowed. It said please connect to the internet in order to open the game. And so and that's getting worse and worse, is from what I'm reading and hearing all over the place, is this DRM licensing stuff. And it's not like in the olden days, in the 90s, we had cartridges, and anyone who had the cartridge, you could just take it wherever and play it. And that's your part of the preservation part of it. These games could be lost if you just people don't have their own ownership of these games.
Yeah, exactly that. People don't realize it. But as you said, especially now, we have problems with blackouts. Across Europe, it's not a problem, but it is something that is looming on the horizon. Hopefully that won't be the case. But during things like that, you only then realize how much of a problem that is, the DRM, because you do not have access if your internet goes down. Your internet provider, for example, has problem with bringing the servers up after blackout and stuff like that. So you are losing access to all of the stuff that you own if you are unable to verify the license each time you launch it. On GOG, there is no such problem. If you have the game downloaded, you can play it.